Hello everyone, and welcome to Manufacturer of the Future, a virtual event that will tell you what you need to know about trends in the manufacturing industry and the tools that leading manufacturers are using to stay ahead of the competition. We're streaming live from our studios here in Redmond, Washington. I'm Wendy Bauer, the General Manager of Microsoft's U.S. Industry Team, and I'm excited to be hosting this special online event for you. Joining me here today are industry and technology experts who will be sharing insights that will help your business succeed in the digital age. Before we kick things off by introducing our opening speaker, we'd like to invite you to take part in our polls throughout the summit. We have a poll question for you to weigh in on during each session. Look for the poll questions in the window just to the side of the video player. Select your responses and we'll share the results with you a short time later. We also want to draw your attention to our resources folder. Click the resources button below to access great bonus content, white papers, and more. Finally, we'd like to invite you to join the conversation on Twitter using our hashtag MSFutureMFG. We'd love to hear from you, so please let us know how you're enjoying our manufacturing virtual event. It's time to officially begin by introducing my first special guest here. He wrote the best-selling book, Disrupting Digital Businesses. He's an award-winning analyst advising Global 2000 businesses about the future of business technology. His expert analysis is frequently quoted in publications like the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, and Forbes. And today, he brings his celebrated insights to you. Our opening speaker is Principal Analyst and CEO of Constellation Research, Ray Wang. Ray, welcome to the show.
Hey, Wendy, how you doing?
Great, thank you. We're going to start by asking first poll question today. Ray gave us a poll for this session. Let's take a look. Which of the top tech trends for 2020 are you most invested in? Artificial intelligence, augmented reality, blockchain, IoT, 3D printing, or cloud? Weigh in right now and we'll check the results a bit later. So Ray, thanks again for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Hey, thanks.
In your book, you outline the big trends we're seeing in digital today. Can you share some of those with us now?
Yeah, we looked at it. 52% of the Fortune 500 merged, acquired, gone bankrupt. They totally fall off the list. You're wondering what happened. Was it the internet? Did a major business, crisis occur? What's going on? And then we looked again. 55% of the Fortune 500, they lost money in 2015. So something big is happening, and we realize there is a business model shift. And if I could pretty much simplify this, we are living in what we call a post-sale, on-demand attention economy. And what that means is everything after the sale seems to be more valuable than just selling the product. And it is on demand in the sense that we're now accessing versus owning. And more importantly, it's an attention economy, because if you don't capture my attention or save me time, I'm not interested.
The instant attention. Where specifically are you seeing the biggest challenges for manufacturers today?
There are a lot of things manufacturers are thinking about. We've got things from globalization. How do we compete in that marketplace? What do we do with all these new types of regulations and borders and cross-trade issues that are popping up? We're thinking about how do we match supply to demand? Can we capture a demand signal better? How do we do precision forecasting and collaboration in a way that we couldn't do before? They're also thinking about what happens after I just sell that product? What do I do? How do I change? What's happening with additive manufacturing? So there's a lot of issues that are happening, and most of these aren't necessarily technology issues. As you know, these are business model transformations that have to happen, where people have to rethink their business and think about what's important, where do they put their best resources towards those issues. So for example, do you really want to hire 300 IT people to keep the thing running? No, take advantage of the cloud. Do you want to, think about putting your best people and figuring out cross-border regulations? No, that stuff should be automated. It should come up. It should be a subscription. So people are changing the way they view these things, but also, especially what's happening in terms of the globalization that's occurring.
Sure. So what are some new business models that are emerging for manufacturers?
Well, a lot of these new business models are focused on how do we jumpstart growth. And I alluded to the fact that post-sale is really important. Now, when we think about post-sale, you sell the product, and traditionally you sell it through a distributor, and you never hear about it until you get a problem. It's like, hey, my tractor doesn't work. Oh, hey, by the way, my part's not working. Can you help me? Well, we're moving to a post-sale economy. And what I mean by that is think about warranties. Think about installation. Think about field service. Think about what you actually do with remote monitoring. All these things are starting to pop up. And if you start building your business models around that, you realize, wait, I was designed just for one part of the business. Now, how do I sell something? I was designed, I got to service this thing. I got to track an asset. I got to put something in a truck. Wait, that's my business model. But product margins are declining massively. And so product companies are quickly becoming services organizations. Take, for example, you get a cell phone. It's kind of neat. It's kind of interesting, but free cell phone with a 2-year service contract. Suddenly you become a services business. It's really about the service contract. It has nothing to do with about selling the phone. That's the excuse. And then think about it, from freemium to premium, services become free. What do you do in that model? So you get to the 10th level of Angry Birds. What do? You have to pay, right? You get to it's 100 gigabytes of some storage provider. Now you got to pay, right? But the point being is, we're trying it out first. We're accessing it, we're testing it, and then suddenly we pay as we get to different levels of experiences. Experience-based companies are giving away experiences for outcomes. They're saying, hey, by the way, if you want 80% uptime, it's going to be $1,000. If you want 100% uptime, it might be $3,000. And so there's that kind of trade-off going on. So we're ultimately working on keeping brand promises, but this product shift to services, services to insights, insights to experiences, experiences to outcomes, that's happening right now.
So it's really changing how the business is operating and how the business owners have to think.
Oh, you completely have to think about it. And that's the transformation. The technologies are kind of cool, but the business models are changing.
Yeah. So along that lines, we hear manufacturers are pushing towards direct to consumer. Can you define what that really means?
It is. So here's the thing. As I said earlier, you sell a product, it goes to a distributor, and you get a call 2 years later and says something doesn't work. Wouldn't it be better if you sold the product, it went through the distributor, but you got the customers to register the warranty. You got them to actually take an IoT sensor in a device. So you could do remote monitoring to say, hey, look, we want to install an update. Here's an update to the firmware. And by the way, this is going to make your tractor. This is going to make your automatic machines. This is going to make your robotics. This is going to make whatever a lot smarter. You get updates all the time. Just subscribe with us. Give us at least your email, your contact information. And then 3 years comes up. Hey, would you like to buy an extended warranty? We know you've had the machine, we've monitored it, we know that you're in pretty good shape, you have different levels of warranties I can offer you. Or maybe when you buy the thing, you want some installation, or you want accessories, you want to cross-sell and upsell. Post-sale, right? Just selling the product gets you started. Everything after that, that's 10x the revenue. And that's one of the ways that you can jumpstart growth.
Does this mean that we'll see a shift to network economies and a return of marketplaces as platforms?
Definitely. I think we're starting to see that in the B2B side. We had a poll, 81% of the respondents basically said, look, B2B networks are a strategic advantage. It's something that we're going to focus back on. Now, when we talk about network economies, we are talking about something even bigger, right? When you take the content, which is a product, a service, an insider experience, when you take the network, which is your distribution models, and then you tie it with technology, you have what we call network economy. These network economies are popping up around everything, and it's going to be industry-based, whether it's manufacturing, but is it discrete versus process? Is it CPG related? Is it high tech? They're going to get down to micro verticals, and these exchanges are actually going to work with each other. Now, the value exchange is not just selling the product. The value exchange is actually predicting insights. It's capturing the big data. It's actually taking that data and figuring out demand signals and being able to forecast against that, or even being able to adjust inventories and supply chains against those demand signals. And I think that's what makes it really exciting, because as we digitize this, data is that foundation. And when we get that data right, we can start selling the insights, we can broker those insights, we can do comparisons, we can benchmark them, and more importantly, we can actually sell those insights with each other.
Yeah, sure. So what role does data play in helping the manufacturers today?
And so here's the thing. Data is the foundation of every one of these digital businesses. And what we really want to do is take structured, unstructured conversations, videos, images, bring those together. And once we have some context and apply that to a business process, we now have the ability to start thinking about, hey, what patterns emerged, right? What does a certain machine run better than another machine? Is it a different condition, right? What's the quality level, right? How can we actually get to ultimately tracking down a recall? I mean, think about this. Everyone loves to talk about data, manufacturing, insights, this is going to be great. What we ultimately want to go is go from data to information, information to insights, and insights to action. Now, where does this come into place? Think about recalls, right? If you've got basically an 8-week recall, that's probably $1 billion, right? If you've got an 8-day recall, we're talking 100 million. And if I can get you down to an 8-hour recall, that's $1 million. How do we get to that?
Savings.
Oh, massive savings. You want to get this right the first time. And that data and the insights, the context where you deliver it, the shipping, the ASNs, all that stuff comes back. And you say, oh, wow, I can actually run a recall and not create a public relations nightmare, might harm my brand, and actually reduce my regulatory risk.
So it all starts with the data.
Starts with the data.
So what do organizations have to do to get their data house in order and to actually be able to support the business models you're talking about?
You know, this is a great point. You know, when you're thinking about getting that data properly and set, you start with the data, and then what you actually do is you have to organize it. That's the transformation. Fit into your models, bring it in, and then you augment. You add things like context. Is that the weather? Is that the color? Is that the time? Is that the location? Right? Where was it? Where did the source come from? And then what you want to do is take that information and then distribute it out. But you secure it. You push it out to downstream systems. You then figure out, do I want to keep this data? Do I get rid of this data? Is this junk? Does it matter? And you come back and you repeat that cycle. We call that an information supply chain, right? And in that information supply chain, you've got to keep that data fresh. That thing is coming in all the time. And here's the interesting thing. By 2020, 60% of your mission critical data, it's coming from outside. It's not in a data warehouse. It doesn't sit on, well, you guys don't have these, but it doesn't sit on the AS400s. It doesn't sit on, like, you know, the mini computer. It is actually coming from streams and insights from other things. So think about it, like you have a factory and you're getting data streams on the machines, right? Those streams are coming from other factories, coming from other demand signals, and we're actually trying to put that together. And ultimately, hey, how do we get a collaborative forecast, right? How do we actually predict, you know, supply shifts? How do we actually reroute, you know, a large order to one of our preferred customers? All that stuff starts to come into play.
Sure. It seems there's an infinite amount of data that you could collect. How would a manufacturer even go about thinking, what should I be collecting data on?
So there's a couple schools of thought. Like one school is collect everything, right? Grab all the data, don't worry about it. You know, it's free, storage doesn't cost anything. Okay, so you can do that. A lot of folks have gone down that path. But there's another one that says, let's start with the business question. And that's the question you want to ask. Do I add 10 more FTEs on that shift? Or do I actually run that production line 15% more efficiently? And you start with these business questions. If you go to every department and say, hey, what are your top 5 business questions? And work your way with the business question, then come back and figure out where does the data sit to answer that question, what business processes you touch, and then which people you connect with, and even machines, then you can actually figure out what to solve each one of these problems. If you try to collect all the data at once and try to figure out what to do, the challenge is you're just collecting the data and you're not answering a business question and you're not addressing a business problem. And we think if you start with the business problem, it's better. Now, here's the challenge. You've got dashboards, you've got reports. These things have been built for the last 10, 15 years. You rely on them, but the reports are static. What I really want to be able to do, I want to answer the business question. I want to change that. I want to model that. I want to share that. I want to be able to connect with folks to figure out how to get to that answer. And more importantly, I want to augment the decision-making process. So give me 3 recommendations. We got to get to that point. And that's where this data plays a role because we're ultimately coming back to artificial intelligence, right? Today, we're like, tell me what's going on. Okay, that's the first step. The second one is make me a recommendation. So make me a suggestion. The third part is, you know, hey, can we figure out, you know, how to actually automate that recommendation over time? And then once we can automate this, we got to figure out, hey, what do we prevent? What can we predict? And really tell me what's going on when I need to know. And there's a whole path around these AI outcomes that you have to get to. But today, just at least tell me what the heck's going on, right? Or why. But ultimately, I want to democratize every person on the shop floor and also on the top floor trying to figure out, hey, how do I make a decision? Do we all have the same data?
Sure. So as you highlighted, the key is really centering it around the business problems. And what are
Definitely.
they? If you're the P&L business owner, you know your problems every day.
Exactly.
Your pain points. So now let's forecast a bit. What do you see as the big tech trends for 2020?
So we look at these every year. We have what we call an astro chart, right? Of course, we're constellation research. And in an astro chart, you basically plot, you know, what you think is the business impact and really the adoption of what's happening in these technologies. And for us right now, the sweet spot of early adopters and really transformational innovation that actually happens, which is the center of this 3x3 chart, are a couple things. IoT definitely is playing a role, right? And we'll talk more about that in a bit. But IoT, it's not just the sensors, it's the context and the data and the information, the insights that are coming into play. The other big one, we're thinking about augmented reality, virtual reality. This mixed reality piece, think about what you do in field service, right? Which machine is buzzing, right? I mean, basically an indicator pops up, just like go straight to that machine, things flow out, and you say, oh, okay, here's the part, here's the schematic, how do I fix that? That's pretty exciting, right? I can actually save an hour on every single visit, right? Being able to do something like that. So you see the massive benefits there. Big data. Data is the foundation. We can't forget about that. Blockchain, right? So imagine if your records and your manufacturing lineage on a recall is actually put into the chain and you hash in all the different connections between suppliers and manufacturers and customers. You now actually have a record of really complex machinery. Do a blockchain on airplane manufacturing, right? All the parts picked out, who actually repaired it. You get the most pristine record. Now, airlines actually have better manufacturing data and warranty and service data than anyone else in the world. It's a good place to start, but imagine places where you don't have that, right? And that's a good one. And then think about what's actually happening with additive manufacturing and 3D printing, right? We're changing the way we build things, the way we get to engineer to order. Small batch manufacturing is popping out. And of course, none of this is going to happen without the cloud.
Sure. So we're going to take a pause and look at how our audience responded to the question. Again, our poll question, which of the top tech trends for 2020 are you most invested in? And our top answer was IoT. Does that surprise you?
No, not at all, right? The big thing around IoT that we tend to forget is that IoT is driving a set of brand new business models. We like to start by talking about, here's the sensor, here's like this network, here's the overall stack. That's not interesting to me, right? One of our clients is doing something really interesting. Basically, they're putting sensors on showers, and showers are kind of cool, but you're like, that's kind of stupid. Why would you do showers? Well, you can put a sensor on a shower for $1 a sensor per month. I can monitor your shower. Take any large hotel, you get 100 rooms. It's $100 per month for monitoring your shower. Now, why do you want to do that? Well, it comes down to NPS, right? Net Promoter Score. If I can actually raise Net Promoter Score by 1 point, I have the ability to drive revenue up anywhere from 5 to 15%. So that's pretty cool. For $100 a month, I'm going to drive like 5 to 15% revenue. I'm in. But that's only the first business model. So now that you have that, what would you do? Well, we're actually thinking about this, and we actually brainstormed, and we're like, no. Let's complete this. Let's give away the monitoring for free. And people are like, no, why would you do that? That's the revenue part. No, give away the monitoring for free. So you go to a large hotel and say, I'm going to give you the monitoring for free. I'm going to drive your revenue up for free. Okay, what's the catch? I want your service contract. You give me your service contract as is, I'll assume it. 7 to 7 will keep the same terms. But after 7 p.m., what am I going to do? I'm going to do something different, and we'll get to that. But if I got your service contract in 3 to 4 years, what happens? I will have replaced almost a third of your parts with my parts. I'll have the data on all my competitors. I'll be able to build a better product. I know which parts to manufacture demand against. So now I have really good insights. But now I got to supply the plumbers. Like, how do I fill the network? I'm going to create an Uber-like plumber network. So I got 3 business models here right away.
It just keeps going and going.
Well, I got the monitoring to drive your NPS. I've got the ability to actually improve my data collection and understanding how to build against demand. I've got the service contract business that creates an Uber network. But wait, there's more. Do you ever steam your clothes in the shower? Do you ever do that?
No.
Often? All right, you're very environmental. I just did that this morning. I was in a rush. I got out and I gotta steam my clothes. I hung it in the shower. Wastes a lot of water if you're not taking a shower with your clothes, but it still wastes a lot of water. If I told you, I'll give you 200 reward points. You keep your shower to 5 minutes, and I'll give you 50 if you go to 10. And after that, I might even take points away from you. I completely change your behavior. I've got 2 more business models. I've got a way to actually create an efficiency program, and I got a loyalty program. 5 business models on IoT at once. And that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about, hey, we put an IoT project, we did big data, put some research scientists on there, and then we dropped it in the cloud. No, I'm talking about transforming your business, right? Changing everything. And that's what makes this exciting, and that's why we talk about digital transformation. This is ultimately about changing business models, changing the way we engage with stakeholders, and even in manufacturers, a lot of these business models that are shifting are going to require you to figure out how to have that agility.
I want to come back to one of the topics you touched on briefly, which is blockchain. For our audience that is not as familiar with blockchain, can you describe it a little bit and some of the applications that you see?
So the most common example of blockchain tends to be Bitcoin. People are like, Bitcoin, what is that? A place to hide money for drug cartels and like money launderers. No. So Bitcoin is an example of what we call a distributed ledger technology. The easiest way to explain that is imagine a centralized database that people have access and permission to, that never gets changed, that's fully transparent, that people can see. So let's say, for example, this actually happened where one of our clients, the University of Texas, they basically created a blockchain and a chain script around your student record. So every course you take, every skill you have, every certificate gets put onto the chain. Now, the person that owns the chain is actually you. You give the universities and all the places you've gotten skills, like let's say you took a course on Angular, or they take a course on like additive manufacturing, that certificate would then be opened up in your hash, which allows you to actually connect it. And more importantly, you can decide what to show other people. So on one end, if you actually have a skill and you get it from someone, they put it onto the record. On the other end, you can only show the things that you want to share with other folks, but you ultimately own the record, and that's your permanent, complete student record that goes with you. No more calling up, waiting for that $10 fee, getting the fax in, validating your ID to get your information. You own the blockchain, right? And that's one example. Now you can do it with land titles, but in manufacturing, what do we really want to do? Track down all the parts and the components that actually put it together. Understand what parts broke and why, or how they get connected. So you get a large installation. Let's say you built a power plant or utility plant. Let's say you built a plane, or let's say you built a combine. Doesn't matter. On the discrete side, perfect. I can actually track that, figure out what's going on. A little bit harder on process, but I can do that too. In pharmaceuticals, I can do that with food, and so I can actually track what's in there. And imagine if I do a recall, or I want to go back and understand a molecular compound. I have that ability to do that.
Oh. So you touched on the ownership of data. How do you see that playing out when you get into a multi-layered supply chain model? And who is really going to own the data?
That's a great question. There's a perfect example of putting the blockchain or distributed ledger technology into place. So the question is, who should own that data? Now, everybody's fighting for that data. Everyone's like, I got to own this. I got to structure it my way. The way I do it in my business is different than everybody else. And we see that in the marketplace. So we actually think that you're going to have the data ownership basically on the manufacturer side. What do they want to expose? On the customer, what do they want to do? On the suppliers, how do they interface? There's a chain for every piece of equipment that's going to occur, or every piece of product that's been manufactured. That's going to happen. I think that data ownership, I honestly think we're going to have some of these open data standards evolve, and I think it's going to be really important. A lot of these things with the standards, if you want networks to happen, they're also going to be very industry focused. And when we think about micro verticals, and each of these micro verticals, it's going to be very different. There are also things that are regional in terms of how people share information, and we'll see those things kind of play out.
Sure. So back to IoT. How does IoT play a role with manufacture? And can you give us a couple examples?
Oh yeah. So going back to what's happening in manufacturing and IoT, the big thing really is, right, we got to think about how you want to use the data. Right, IoT, I'm collecting lots of sensor information. Okay, that's great. I'm getting context, I'm getting location. And what we're really trying to get to is what we call mass personalization at scale. You need three components to get the mass personalization at scale. First one, context, right? Role, relationship, okay, identity, that's one part. Location, where are you? Oh wait, geospatially, where are you? Right, that's, I'm in the building. Well, what floor are you on? I'm on the third floor. Okay, you're on the fifth floor, great. So we gotta know that kind of stuff. Time, which is free. Sometimes weather, which can impact what you actually do in production or supply chains. Now, if you have 4 out of these, there's at least 20 things that you can kind of capture. You've probably got 50 to 60% of the data to just have enough context to actually change the way you look at manufacturing. Now what happens on the IoT side with manufacturing? Well, typically it's like, we got these sensor data, if equipment failure goes down, okay, great. I've got IoT in place and some beacons to tell me, hey, where do I actually fix a part? Okay, I get that. But it's when we actually blend IoT, big data, cloud, and AR, VR, we get some very interesting scenarios. You send a field service tech to go fix something. You now have the ability to actually go in and see which parts were there, how was it manufactured, and you get all the information you need. If you think about what's happening on virtual manufacturing, building digital models, right? The ability to actually run a digital model, test it, get it up before you actually build something, that's also another area where we see this come into place because the data from the IoT sensors are helping you to shape those models. So you see a lot of places where this is happening.
Wow. So our final question for today, how should organizations plan their next 3 years in terms of a technology foundation?
So I think the first step is for you to figure out what business model problem you're trying to solve. Get the business model right, form follows function, then you can figure out what technologies. Now, if you can answer that business model question and how you want to transform, we also always say start with the cloud. Now, why do you want to start with the cloud? Well, if you're rapidly innovating and you can't consume updates fast enough, you're like kind of person that throws the CD and tries to do something over the weekend to update and upgrade. That's bad, right? And the problem is, it's like by the time you stand up your own hardware or you get something hosted and you get the server tuned and the app server tuned and the database and all that stuff in place, I will have lapped you 3 times. I will lap you 3 times in the development cycle. So speed is the reason to get to the cloud, and then the regulatory. That's a big piece because you don't really want to deal with that. That's not fun. Let someone else do that at scale. And then the third one is security, because the cloud gets you there. Now, once you're in the cloud, you've got to get your data house in order. We talked about that earlier. Get the big data in place. That's a very important piece. And then start figuring out what projects make sense. IoT, we talked about some of the business models. AI, it's a little bit further out. Think about that, but you can't do it without your data house in order. So that's why the data comes into place. AR, VR is kind of interesting. In the next 2 to 3 years, every phone will have AR, VR capabilities. Figure how you want to use that and incorporate that to your business models. And then start figuring out things like forecasting and precision models and getting operations in place so that you can jumpstart growth.
It's been a pleasure having you here today, Ray. So we've just heard Ray's expert analysis on the current and future state of the industry. Now let's start looking at how IoT and predictive analytics are accelerating innovations in manufacturing. As we get ready for our next speaker, we have a video for you. See how ABB is using predictive analytics tools for real-time data insights, enabling charging station manufacturers to take corrective action before customers are ever impacted. Take a look.
Problems happen every day. Some of them occur in plain sight, while others happen without you ever knowing it. They never happen when it's convenient, and there's nothing more frustrating than a problem you can't solve on your own. Some problems are worse than others. But what if we can fix these problems before they ever occur? Microsoft and ABB have come together to do just that. Together, we've created a solution that not only monitors the health of ABB chargers, but can predict issues and recommend corrective measures before the customer ever feels the impact. ABB technicians have a holistic view of the entire system at their fingertips. Together, Microsoft and ABB enable users to manage critical real-time data and take action. So customers never have to feel the pain of a problem they can't solve.
What people tend to forget in Formula One is that it takes in excess than 1,000 people to design, build, and operate 2 of the fastest racing cars in the world. It's all about collaboration and data produced by everyone. This year, we are going to experience a major change in the regulation. Every single part of the car is roughly composed of 20,000 parts, will be new. But that's normal. It's all cool. Everyone's cool because everyone knows what they have to do thanks to the experience, but also the software that support this organization. This is where Microsoft is helping.
We started making parts for the new car before last season had finished. The pressure's really on us to deliver. We can have parts that are design released a day before they're needed, and they need to go straight on the car for the car to be able to fire up.
It's very important here that we get our manufacturing processes to be as streamlined as they possibly can. That has been the main area of focus for business intelligence. The introduction of Power BI and the products from Microsoft will have an impact on the car and the ultimate performance.
Data is critical to F1. Without it, we wouldn't understand how the car's performing and we wouldn't be able to do the simulations to prepare for the season ahead. Formula One is very strict. We can't just build a car to any spec we want. Things like the amount of processing we're allowed to do and the number of hours we can run the wind tunnel are dictated by regulations. We see this as a way that we have to innovate to be able to get a competitive advantage.
There's 20 races this year, 13 are flyaway races. When you're the other side of the world, time zone's the biggest problem. You have to communicate on a platform where people can see the information when you're asleep and you can see their information when they're asleep.
While the cars are going around the track, over 200 sensors are sending back a constant stream of time series data. Having our data stored in the cloud means we can access it wherever we are, but we have to make sure that our data is protected, and we know the Microsoft Cloud is only accessible by the people we want to access it.
What is very unique in Formula One is that the result of our work is measured against competitors every other week and in front of everyone. We cannot negotiate on deadline, we cannot negotiate on budget. Everyone has to work against the clock. We have to be ready for when the lights go out.
Welcome back to Manufacturer of the Future. In our next session, we're bringing the focus on how IoT and predictive analytics are changing the game for manufacturers. Our speaker is an IoT expert with some great insights to share with us. He is also going to demonstrate an innovative new IoT solution made possible through a partnership between Microsoft and Hitachi Solutions. My guest is Senior Vice President and Head of Research and Development at Hitachi Solutions, David Bishop. David, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Let's take a look at the poll question we have for David's session. It is, if you're looking at an IoT solution, which best describes your plans? Connecting devices or machines, analytics on the data coming from devices or machines, connecting back-end services in the cloud, a combination of all three, or none of the above. Select your response right now and we'll check the results in a few minutes. So again, welcome, David. Thanks for joining us today. So there's a lot of buzz about IoT. What exactly is it, and why is everyone so excited about it?
I think today, IoT to me is a very simple thing. It's basically any device that has an on-off switch. And if you look at the home even today, if you look at refrigerators, coffee makers, heating systems, etc., they all have the ability to communicate somewhere, wirelessly through the internet to the cloud. And those are IoT devices. In a manufacturer's world, and specifically if you start to go into the industrial world as such, you start looking at any component of a device, of a machine could actually have. So if you look at an HVAC unit, for example, and you start to look at compressors, right, power supplies, that sort of stuff, they all have the ability to send information to the cloud. And so we regard them as IoT devices. Gartner, I see, estimate that by 2020 there'll be something like 26 billion IoT devices out there. I've seen estimates that go as high as 100 million, so who knows where we're going to go with it. But it's exploding today, it really is. It's a growing business. And I think what people forget with any form of IoT device, and even your cell phone is an IoT device, quite honestly, but it's not just the devices themselves, it's people as well, because people are connected to those devices. So you have people connecting to devices, connecting to people, and devices connecting to devices as well. That's how I regard the whole IoT world today.
So where do you see the greatest impact of IoT and predictive analytics for manufacturers?
So there's two sort of areas to me for manufacturers with predictive analytics. If you think about traditional type manufacturing, they've done preventative, we can cover that later if you like. But to me, there's preventative maintenance, which is well-known time-served type maintenance, where every 3 months, every 6 months, you go and do something. With predictive maintenance, manufacturers now have the ability to understand how their machines are performing, whether they're actually on the plant floor themselves, or whether they're actually out in the field somewhere, or whether they're pushing them out to customers. And I think Ray covered some of this earlier as well to a degree, but For me, where the excitement starts to become is once you start looking at that data and understanding that data, you can understand how your machines are actually working within the plant themselves. So if you take, something that's out there in a manufacturing plant itself that has IoT devices connecting to the cloud that are talking back to the central systems and everything, we can start to understand what the rules are around those and what we can do to make them better or to operate better or to prevent downtime within the manufacturing world.
So this comes back to what Ray described as understanding the business problem and what you're trying to solve.
Exactly.
So what are some of the ways that manufacturing companies can use IoT in predictive maintenance and analytics to transform their business?
So going on from that previous point there, where I see the biggest advantage for them is, so people regard IoT and predictive maintenance or IoT itself as just the ability to monitor devices themselves. What's the temperature of this device today, right? Is it going to exceed such and such, right? If it gets above 70, then I want to do something with it. That in itself is fairly simplistic, okay? That's just streaming that data and just watching it basically on a dashboard, and I'll show you some of that later, how we cover that in our solution. Where it's more interesting for me is when you start to combine all the various components of a piece of machinery, right? So IoT, a single device in isolation doesn't tell you that much. When you start to take that particular IoT device and then actually take all the other devices that operate around it as well and start to understand the components and the outside parameters and the outside effects, such as temperature, such as operational parameters, that sort of stuff, you can start to understand what is causing issues with that machine. You can take it a stage further, in my opinion, in as much as that if you start to see that, particular machines have the same problem consistently. Is it because it's a manufacturing problem from the manufacturer themselves? Is it the fact that you have specific people that are repairing those devices or maintaining those devices? And maybe you have to start thinking about different training techniques. Right? So you can start to collect all this data in the cloud, you can start to analyze it, and you can start to do a lot of predictive algorithmic type work behind it to see where you can make efficiencies within the business itself. So it's not just understanding how that particular device is working, it's the overall picture that you have to understand, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. So newer equipment has the ability to communicate and connect to the internet. What about older legacy equipment?
And that's an issue because traditionally, if you look at, again in the manufacturing world specifically, most of that equipment tends to have a long life cycle, 10, 15, 20 years even. And so if you've just implemented new equipment within the last 5 years, it's highly unlikely you're going to be changing it. And so there's several options there. Either that you can actually retrofit, and I think this is something where a lot of companies are working harder today to build equipment that will allow you to retrofit existing equipment so it can actually become an IoT type of device. I think we still need more solutions to it, quite honestly. The other option is that if they can't actually connect to the internet itself per se, we have the ability today to put edge-type computing within that machinery. And that allows you to actually collect data locally. You can do a certain amount of processing with it. And I know Microsoft has done a lot of work within the gateway and the edge world as well to enable that functionality. So we can start to take that information and then we can start to percolate it upwards into the cloud at a point in time. But at least we now have the ability, or will have the ability shortly, to actually take and monitor equipment locally where it's based, so it doesn't need to communicate as such. Now, if the actual IoT device has no means, or if the actual device, I should say, has no means of communicating at all, that is a different problem, and that is something that has to be solved at a point in time.
So what are the new technology enablers that now make predictive analytics possible?
Well, new enablers. So there's a lot around there. I mean, I think first off, predictive analytics has been around for years. I mean, people have been using it. The banking, the financial industry has been using it for a long time for credit card fraud detection, that sort of stuff. Where it becomes very exciting for us today is, one, there's a lot more data. I mean, we are collecting not just terabytes, but petabytes of data now. Which allows us to now do advanced analytics against that information, plus the pure power of processing today. When I look at everything that we collect, we put into the Azure cloud, right? We put it up on a SQL server in the cloud. We have the ability now to parallelize and grow that data as we need to, without bounds, quite honestly. Unlike before, where if it was on my premise, I'd actually have to install new hardware and whatever. Now I can just grow it exponentially as I need to. So it's the pure power of processing today that's enabled that, as well as the amount of data around it. Because, again, you know, the nice thing about IoT devices is if you have 50 devices all the same, you can collect information for a single device, understand that, right, start to do some predictive work and use that same information and apply it across the other devices as well, assuming they're like sets.
Mm-hmm. So machine learning, what exactly is it and how does it play into all of this?
So machine learning is what we call predictive analytics. It's the pure algorithm, it's the math behind it all. It's not rocket science as some people might think, I think. For us, there's several components to machine learning. This is where it becomes very exciting. You know, within our solution, we actually rely on a language called R, and we use R server up in the cloud, up in the Microsoft cloud. What this enables us to do is several things. There's the classic, what I call the classic type of machine learning. What's the remaining useful life cycle? You know, what's the predicted time to failure of this particular device, this sort of stuff. Where it becomes more interesting, I believe, personally, is what I call adaptive analytics. And by that I mean that if I take a device, let's just take a thermostat as a simple example. So a thermostat, we know, say, operates within the ranges of 30 and 70 degrees. And so long as it's working between those parameters, then it's fine, it's working. The difference is, though, what happens, though, and we actually have rules engines that allow you to do that, obviously, and I'll show you some of those as well. But what happens if that particular device now is going 30 degrees to 68 degrees, back to 31 degrees to 58 degrees? Well, the rules engine doesn't actually really care about that because it hasn't gone outside its parameters that it's governed by. What we do is we actually have this predictive work, or what we call adaptive analytics, that actually recognizes that there's a pattern going on here. And we need to recognize that there's a pattern and what should we do about it. So we can take preventative type maintenance against the device before it fails itself because something is out of bounds. We can also take all the information around it from the other devices that might be causing that impact as well. And so we can start to understand how, you know, this particular device, because it's in this particular corner of a machine shop, right, versus this same device that's over here in the open, they're operating differently, and that there has to be a cause and effect behind that, and we can start to understand and diagnose that, and so people can start to take advantage of that technology.
So the data is really the foundation to all of this, and the data itself is great. So what do I do with it, and how do I begin to visualize it?
So and I think this was partially covered earlier as well by Ray. Data, you know, it is very easy just to go ahead and say, I'm just going to collect everything. The key really is understanding what the data is that you actually need to do something effective with it. And so it might be something as simple as collecting the parameters, the operational, you know, output of an IoT device. What's the temperature? What's the power readings, right? But more importantly for us as well is what are the failure points, right? Without failure points and understanding what causes a failure, you can't do any form of predictive work behind it. So you need to collect not just the data itself, you know, the regular operating data. You need to understand, again, cause and effect. What caused this failure? When did it fail? And what time? So when we start looking at how we collect data, we start to collect, you know, a thorough stream. And to me, 6 months is good of data. A year is even better. And obviously, as you go on and on collecting more and more data, so you can start to fine tune your actual algorithms and the ability to predict a lot more efficiently.
So you've brought a demo with you here today. Before we flip over to the demo, we're going to take a pause and go back to our poll question that we asked earlier to our audience. If you're looking at an IoT solution, which best describes your plans? The top choice was the combination of all three. So does that response by our audience?
I think if it had been me, I'd have been very concerned about this talk. But yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all. It's a combination. I think people understand what IoT is today. You know, if you go back a few years, IoT was a buzzword, but it wasn't that well understood. And I think nowadays people are starting to understand what IoT is, but more importantly, the fact that by making use of the data from those devices, they can actually start to make key business decisions around it. And it's not just, as I said before, and I can't emphasize this enough, quite honestly, it's not just understanding the actual IoT devices and being able to predict the failures about those IoT devices, it's the whole business behind it as well, and the efficiencies that can be incurred, you know, as a result of it. You know, the ability to dispatch field service engineers, or the ability to order parts in well in advance of actually needing them. There's nothing more impactful to a business's bottom line than having a machine fail on you and then having to wait 3 weeks for a part to come in.
Downtime.
And that's the key behind all of this.
Great. So we're going to move over to your demo here, and I have
Right.
some questions that we'll walk through as you're showing us the demo. So maybe you can start in the demo to really help us understand the difference between preventative and predictive maintenance and how that might be visualized here.
But happy to. So we as part of this, and this is all data that we collect for every IoT device. This is a very simple one. I tend to do this demonstration. I have a simulator, just to give you some background, a simulator that simulates wind turbines. All right, so that allows me to collect a lot of data behind it. This particular one is in Power BI, and so using this sort of information, I can now start to look at very general information at a high level around the state of my wind turbine farms and everything behind it. I can start to drill into them a bit better, and so for a particular device, I can go and see, how those wind turbines are actually performing for me. What's interesting in this state is that we actually collect a lot of information. So you'll see we're collecting generator RPM, temperatures in this. This comes back to the point I made earlier around it's not just one single IoT measurement in isolation. You can't do any form of predictive work against that or preventative work against that. You have to understand all of the points, all of the inputs. And so for this, we're collecting 4 different IoT devices, which impacts the actual performance of that particular wind turbine. Any one of those could impact something downstream as well. So as an example, if the rotor RPM goes off the charts because, I don't know, a hurricane hits it, right, that could actually affect the rotor itself, the rotor motor. As a result, the temperatures build up, et cetera, et cetera. So it's understanding everything together collectively. So again, and then you can actually drill in a bit more here. And so if I start to look at some of the interesting components behind it, and this comes back to your question around the predictive stuff, all right. So I can actually say, give me some information, please, on a particular wind turbine, and I can drill down to one of those wind turbines, and it's showing me here remaining useful life, days to failure, basically. This is what it's telling me here. This is measured consistently. This isn't just something, because we're streaming data all the time and we're collecting that data all the time, we have the ability to run these algorithms as frequently as we want. Traditionally, we tend to run these 6 hourly. For this sort of equipment. Other places it might be just daily, sometimes weekly. But that allows us to start understanding the impact and the changes that could be occurring. At the same time, as well as running this sort of algorithm, we also run algorithms at the back end that understand what I was talking about with regard to the adaptive analytics side of things. So show me, any differences that might be occurring that aren't in the rules engine, and I'll come onto the rules engine. The other thing that I'd like to show very quickly here is just, this is what actually looks like when you're actually streaming real-time data. So this is actually collecting real-time information from a simulated wind turbine, but it allows me as a user, right, of this system to actually go and see what the impact is and how my particular IoT devices are actually performing against that particular wind turbine.
Great. So the demo that you're showing with us, can you describe a little bit about exactly what it is?
Happy to. So we actually use Microsoft 365, Dynamics 365. We built on top of that platform. So within Dynamics 365, there's a field service component and there's a connected device component. So we've built on top of and extended that particular solution. Right? We like to think to make it easier for people to start thinking about IoT devices. The key for us is that if you think about any IoT device, a single IoT device has operating parameters. If you're operating between this and this, then you're fine, right? I don't really care about it. We collect the data, obviously, and we analyze the data and we can visualize the data, but within the actual function of what we call our predictive service hub, we don't care about it because it's working fine. If it goes outside those boundaries, we can create rules, and we have a rules engine that allows you to say, for this particular rule, for this particular device, and for this particular type of performance, right? Or we want you to run this workflow. And we can create workflows that send commands back to the device, such as reset yourself, such as shut down, as well as creating cases, what we call cases in 365, or even work orders, and as well as dispatching field service engineers to it. We could then go ahead and start to order parts from the other back-end systems and stuff, and that's how we work it. We've tried to make it as simple as possible for people to create these workflows and to execute them autonomously, quite honestly. In a perfect world, my ultimate goal is that all of this would be autonomous. Right? These devices would just look after themselves, so to speak.
So for companies that currently don't have historical data in place to perform predictive analytics, what's the best path for them to get started and to get there?
So if you have not, and we come across a lot of companies in that situation, quite honestly, we have the ability to do qualitative type analysis against that data and some form of prediction against it, because at the end of the day, it comes back to monitoring if you start very simple, which is purely monitoring IoT devices, and that's again where this solution really fits into itself. You know what your operating parameters are for specific machines and therefore specific devices within that machine. And so we can set you up with, so you'd set up with that. Once you've done that, you can then start to capture that data. And as you start to capture the data, obviously it grows organically and historically, and we can start to analyze that data on an ongoing basis. Once you start to get, within a month or 2 months worth of data, and depending on the number of devices that you have, because, one device itself might not give you that much information over time. But once if you have multiple devices of the same type, then obviously we're going to get a lot more information, we're going to get a lot more data, and therefore we can start to do some form of predictive work behind them much quicker. But in the short term, just being able to monitor and take actions against those devices is a very good start for most companies.
Sure. So let's go back to your demo here for a few minutes. So it seems like there's a lot of pieces that really need to be in place to properly understand and get the capabilities out of this. Can you show us a few of the key pieces of data that really need to be there?
Happy to.
To get started.
Yeah, happy to. So again, this is where I have the wind turbines set up themselves. So for each wind turbine, and this is what I was saying to you before, we can actually create a set of rules behind each one. What we've also done is we have the ability behind it that allows you to template this information. Apparently it's going to take a little longer than usual, I'm afraid. Okay, there we go. So for this particular wind turbine, you'll see that it's a registered device. I have some monitoring, what we call monitoring workflows behind it, which is gear oil pressure and temperature. And so based on those particular values, I want to take an action. So if the gear oil pressure does whatever I decide, and these can all be preset as templates, or you can individualize them per device as well if you want to. Generically, most people will take the same piece of information and just template it across. But you'll see here that I have the ability to measure, give it specific measurements. It tells me what my minimum operating ranges are, what my maximum operating ranges are, what my boundaries are around that, and what I want you to do as a result of it. In this particular case, you'll see I'm just going to send a command to the device that basically just resets it. So it's as simple as that. Using these templates, though, it means that if I have a lot of IoT devices, I can start to just template them and just push them out there and get them all up and running very, very quickly. And once they're up and running in the system, then we're going to start collecting that data behind them. And then we can start to take actionable insight, or we can take some actions behind them.
Mm-hmm. So how does Hitachi Solutions work with manufacturers to get started in understanding how IoT can help them?
So traditionally what we do is we tend to like to do a POC, because a lot of people don't understand the value behind this necessarily. They understand the marketing hype behind it, quite honestly, but the actual value of this that can be brought to them isn't well understood. So we like to do what we call a POC first, a proof of concept, where we'll normally just take some of their simple devices, right, their basic devices, and we will actually install them and get them up and running here. And once they start to see that, and once we start to collect that data and that information, then we can do a lot more with it.
Sure. So our last question on your demo here today. So now, if you've detected a problem, what can you do with it? And really, how do you set it up in the system, in the demo tool, to do that?
So we can do a lot. I mean, I'll start actually, if I start at the back end, we actually, as part of the solution, we actually have a bot. Okay, and so the bot actually allows anybody that isn't necessarily on the system itself, obviously, and without a PC or anything, but so long as they have Skype or they have SMS or text capabilities, they can actually kick in the bot. So if you're somebody out there in the manufacturing field walking around, you can now go and kick up the bot, and it allows you to create a case, so you can submit an issue to it. That's the simplest form of it, okay? Within the system itself, we can almost do anything. So if we recognize that a device is failing, we can actually issue alerts around that. We can create a work order. We can dispatch a field service engineer automatically. We can even, if you're in the actual field service space, we can actually even notify the customer that a field service engineer is on their way out to you. So there's a whole host of capabilities behind it.
Capabilities. So we do have a question from our audience that we're going to take. So are there efforts to standardize how different sensors send the same kind of data?
I believe there are. I don't pretend to be totally on board with, knowledgeable. There are about 4 or 5 different communication standards. One of the reasons I actually love the IoT hub, the Azure hub, quite honestly, is that it understands all of those different ones. I think each manufacturer tends to send their own information their own way today. I would like to think at a point in time, as IoT, takes over more and more, I'd like to think that we can start to standardize it. But today, I'm not aware of a standard, but I might be totally wrong there.
Right. So thank you for your time today, David. It's been a pleasure having you join us.
Thank you very much.
Our next speaker shows us how to harness the power of the cloud. To help kick that off, let's hear how Rolls-Royce is using cloud technology in its jet engines to bring about transformative benefits to their customers. Take a look.
As an airline pilot, I know that to fly with the best, you need to work with the best. With over 13,000 engines in operation around the globe, Rolls-Royce provides the services to maintain them at peak performance. Today, each engine has thousands of sensors that can produce terabytes of data on long-haul flights. Making sense of all that data is critical in transporting my passengers safely and efficiently. Rolls-Royce uses Azure IoT Suite to analyze data remotely and deliver real-time, actionable insights to me and to the airlines about engine performance and operational efficiencies. Advanced analytics help us optimize fuel economy, anticipate maintenance needs, and avoid costly downtime and delays. A single unscheduled disruption and its knock-on effect to a fleet and the passengers can cost an airline up to $1 million a day. With early notice, our team can proactively have parts at the right place and time, reducing inventory costs and maximizing availability. Up to 1/3 of a plane's weight is fuel. As a pilot, I decide how much fuel my plane carries. Insights into engine efficiency, weather conditions, flight path, and scheduled landings impact my decision. Cortana Intelligence helps me choose the optimal fuel level to maximize efficiency. With 40% of our operating budget devoted to fuel, even a small percentage reduction can save us tens of millions of dollars each year. Microsoft and Rolls-Royce, reaching new heights in customer value.
Welcome back, everyone. We've been hearing today about just how critical the cloud is for a company's digital transformation. And as we can all attest, a key driver of success in the digital age is operational efficiency. To survive in the current marketplace, today's businesses must leverage the power of the cloud to create more intelligent systems. My next guest is an expert on the subject, here to share insights with us on how to do that most effectively. He's Hitachi Solutions Manufacturing and Supply Chain Industry Vice President, Martin Bagas. Martin, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Wendy. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
It's our pleasure. As you know, we start every session with a poll question. Let's take a look at the one we have for Martin's session. The poll is, which of the following is the best measure of a data-driven organization? Growth in the business, increased customer satisfaction, using social media for marketing. Weigh in right now, and we'll see what the most popular response is a bit later. So Martin, we're hearing today about new opportunities IoT and predictive analytics are presenting. In your experience at Hitachi, are you finding that today's manufacturers are really ready to take advantage of these technologies?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's in every conversation. So as we go out and talk to customers in the field, it's top of mind. Again, every conversation we have, some aspect of it is coming up. So as customers have gone through this transformation, I think Ray was talking about this earlier, this big transformation from really going from a product company or kind of an equipment-based company to now kind of a customer experience-based company. So manufacturing companies have been going through that transition for the last couple of years. So that's put a whole bunch of change on them. So they have to change the way they think about their business needs, the way they think about their applications, and then you add on that the increased consumer demand about how fast they want stuff, the response rates, social impact of that. I want instant response. it's really kind of lit a fire under manufacturers to go, they have to change the way they work. So they're very aware of that, and it's driving good adoption of these technologies a lot faster. So the one thing we have seen in the last couple of years, I think Ray and David both hit on this, is the devices are getting ready. So as manufacturers are rolling out new equipment, they're making them either IoT embedded devices or open architecture for integration to other monitoring tools. And they're starting to collect that data, and they're starting to get that on the back end. So we look at it as like there's a lot of information they're starting to capture. They're bringing together these data sets. They're really starting to build this kind of data mine or this data information from IoT and from other sources inside of their environments. And now it's kind of looking at they're getting ready, or they're planning on getting ready for the next step, which is really kind of the digital transformation. Yeah, so I think they're definitely ready and they're excited. I'm excited, especially after watching some of the stuff we looked at today.
Yeah. So what are the key challenges you're beginning to see, and why aren't more manufacturers using cloud technologies today?
Yeah, so I'm from North Carolina, so we deal with a lot of traditional mainframe technology. We have a lot of manufacturers that are 50, some that are 100 years old. So when you look at that, they've got a lot of legacy systems. So we go into companies, sometimes they have 9, 10 more ERP or customer-based information systems. So they've got a lot of this information that's been built over time. Again, some of it 10, 15, even 20 years old. So inside of those systems is kind of these processes, this data, this information that they've kind of organically grown or customized to represent their business. And inside that's kind of also the secret sauce about why they've been successful. So they're still in business, they're still doing good things, it's embedded in these legacy systems. So it's kind of hard to go in and go, hey, we're going to change everything and change your DNA, right? So it's got to be very careful about how you approach that conversation. The other thing is you look at acquisitions, mergers, private equity coming in and buying companies. So you take that concept of all this data and these processes and you compound it with all those. So now you've got 5 or 6 companies you've brought together around this concept of growing like share of wallet, so complementary services on top of your core business, building a service organization on top of your equipment-based business. So you add in all those things. So think about the concept there is, I've got 9 or 10 systems where my customer data is. So that's a big challenge, just trying to think about how do I get one customer record across all these organizations. Then you've merged 5 or 6 companies with different sales processes, different approaches, different avenues into the same customer, and now you've got how do I get to one sales process or one customer service process. Those are big challenges just by themselves. So then thinking about adding a transformation and everything else they have to do, it can get pretty daunting kind of from the beginning of where do you even start, how do you get there?
Sure. So in businesses today, are you finding that a lot of companies have individuals that are really dedicated to understanding the capabilities and what could be separate from the people that are trying to run their businesses today?
Yeah, we've seen a big emergence of that. One of our customers, they've created around like sales excellence leaders. So you have your salespeople that are your sales process people that are out selling day-to-day, interacting with customers, and they've created these roles around the process-driven people. And their focus is process improvement, process organization, and making the organization better. We see that a lot in sales. We're seeing that more and more on the manufacturing side, where you're creating these kind of centers of excellence that focus on process change. And we're seeing that as really good because those are the people that understand, this is how we've done it before. And they get a lot into this kind of paradigm of that's not how we've done it for the last 50 years. And they're trying to break down those things, which is opening the door for this digital transformation and definitely the cloud technology.
So is there a silver lining to any of this?
I think there is, and I really hope there is for a lot of these guys. The value's there. And when you look at IoT, you look at like predictive analytics, and you look at the impact that could have to the organization on cost benefits, and even the value to the customer, there's still a lot of things that they're very positive about that. We're seeing now, again, customers that haven't upgraded systems in 10 or 15 years, and they're coming in and going, everything's on the table. And 5 or 6 years ago, when you go to a customer and go, hey, what are the items that we can't touch? And they would give you a list of, the CEO personally built the AS400 application, you can't touch that. Now people are going blank slate. So they'll wipe the slate clean. They're willing to go to complete cloud transformation and go, everything's open. Let's transform our business. So that's allowing them to kind of rethink the way they work, rethink the way they interact with their customers, rethink the way they optimize their employees, and really take a benefit of that. And the great thing with all this is the technology couldn't be better now than it ever has been. So you look at the ease of deployment in the cloud, the ease of integration. It's one platform fully integrated. So if you've been waiting and sitting on the side going, we're waiting for technology to catch up, and now's the time. This is what you've been waiting for.
So there's a perception that it's difficult to get started with these solutions. What is your advice for a customer just getting started? And then what would be the first thing that you would recommend they do?
That's a good question. It's a common challenge. I mean, we see that pretty much every customer just get into kind of analysis paralysis. There's so many things. You heard Ray and David talking about all the things that you could do, the connected devices, all the data. So it can be very hard to kind of get started from that perspective. The biggest thing when you look at this is digital transformation. It's about change on processes. It's on systems, which impact people. So there's a big change aspect to this and how you manage that. So the first thing we tell people is really get alignment on executive sponsorship. So if you've got a great executive sponsor that's going to help drive change across the organization, or you've got like that change management group that's driving process change, really getting them aligned and getting the buy-in and driving that down. Then you're really getting into planning, right? So we help our customers out a lot doing we call road mapping sessions, developing 1 or 2 or 3 year plan where we look at the big buckets of items. You don't have to get down to the nitty-gritty detail of fields and forms. We're looking at the big items or the big workloads that we want to accomplish. And inside of that, there typically we'll find there's 2 or 3 items that are the big boulders. These are the ones that are going to be hard to move. These are the ones we have to plan well in advance for and have transition plans and have bigger impact to maybe the user audiences or to your customers. So laying out that plan really allows you to kind of figure out and apply resources correctly, plan ahead on transition, maybe, do data cleanup, whatever that needs to be done. Then you can kind of step back and go the first step, start small. You don't have to boil the ocean on some of the stuff that we're doing here. We can take a look at maybe just customer equipment in a division or in a group, and using those foundational pieces as kind of a jump start for kind of re-architecting your whole business. But if you start with that plan and you've kind of designed with the end game in mind, you're way ahead on where you can go, and you can use that first little project as a pilot to kind of get rolling and see some immediate quick value.
Yeah. So as you're engaging with a large number of customers out there, are you seeing kind of a blending between customers approaching it very strategically on a master plan versus those who want to really learn more and start with one small project to really understand the ROI?
Yeah, so definitely, when we see our discussion with customers, planning has to happen. Like when it has to happen can be, kind of up for negotiation. So a lot of customers are like, we want to start with a plan, we want to lay it out, we've got budget cycles we need to go through, we need to have kind of a program laid out over the next couple of years about what we're going to do. Other customers go, we need to prove it can actually work and show some tangible value quick, then we're going to go into planning. So we're still going to do that, but they want to get started to kind of prove their case. And, there's pros and cons on both sides of that. I kind of like the pilot aspect because what that does is start getting early user adoption. People see how great the technology can be or what it can do, the impact, and then you start getting this pull demand. So the users are asking you for stuff. They want stuff. They want to get more engaged versus another big IT project or another big engagement. So creating that pull demand, that creates excitement, and that's the first foundation of kind of creating user adoption and getting the system actually successfully deployed.
So Martin, we're going to take a pause and flip back over to our poll response from the audience. Again, our poll question was, which of the following is the best measure of a data-driven organization? As you can see, our top response from the audience was growth in a business. Is that common from the discussions that you have with your customers?
I think it is. The customer aspect of it, from customer satisfaction is definitely a big one. One of the guys I used to work for said, if you make the customers happy, revenue and everything else will follow. So I'm a big believer in, make the customer happy and focus on that. But not surprising.
So let's flip gears a little bit. To those who aren't familiar with, exactly what is Dynamics 365?
Yeah, so it's a lot of stuff. And, there's a lot of things inside of it. The best way to think about it, especially in this context, is the platform of action. So if you think about Dynamics 365, you've got sales, you've got customer service and kind of customer experience, you've got marketing, you've got field service, you've got manufacturing operations, you got financials and accounting, traditional things like that. Then you got the whole predictive analytics. And on top of that, you leverage the collaboration and the communication platform on top of Office 365. So those are all the kind of moving parts that are inside of it. What it really is it allows you to kind of capture that kind of customer lifecycle or customer transaction in an end-to-end model. So let's think about what that means. Typical customer cycle, you may have a lead early on, and then way down at the end, as Ray was talking about, kind of the post-sale, you got warranties and claims and other stuff where you're kind of keeping them happy and keeping them as a customer. So think about a platform that allows you to kind of take that lead and that customer experience happens there through the sales cycle, into again maybe that sale, the guy, the field service guy who's doing the installation, all the way into parts and aftermarket service. So, and then think about that information that's shared across of it and how you can leverage that to really drive a better customer experience. And that's really what Dynamics 365 is all about. It's tying together all those communications and collaboration points for a customer in an end-to-end scenario that really allows you to kind of see that full life cycle customer and then capture intelligence around that and definitely allow your internal team to be more efficient and more productive and collaborate better on that information.
So if a customer is interested in Dynamics 365 but isn't really at the point yet in terms of an entire business end-to-end solution, is there a modular approach that they can begin with, or do they have to start?
Very, very much so. Like I said, even the customers that are going, hey, replace it all, and we're going to do end-to-end, you're still doing that in phases. So it's a lot of work to kind of boil the ocean again and kind of revamp everything. So you can start with your sales organization, you can start with a call center, your customer service group, your field service group, or on operations side. So any of those modules really allow you to break that up. Again, it kind of comes back to thinking through what's the end game. Where are you trying to go to with this? So you can plan accordingly and kind of do configuration design once, and then as you started adding modules. So if we started with sales, we planned out our customer record to account for what we want to do in customer service and field service and in operations. We've kind of planned ahead, and then that allows us to kind of scale quickly into those other phases. So as we go into iteration 2, iteration 3, iteration 4, we're really able to kind of leverage that core framework or foundation to, again, accelerate the adoption of the system.
So the planning is the key.
Yeah, definitely planning is key on all that stuff.
So how does Dynamics 365 support IoT and predictive analytics solutions?
Yeah, so this is a good one, and again, what Ray and Dave are talking about, a lot of stuff on the IoT side, very exciting. But IoT without the ability to take action is kind of pointless, right? So you're going to capture all this data. Dave was talking about millions of devices connected into it. So you got all this information. You got alerts, you got monitoring, you got those thresholds, you got our templates of devices. All this information is coming in. So you need a platform where you can actually start taking action on some of those things. And again, that's how these things start working together. So if we think about the different ways that we can kind of integrate that, from IoT and CRM tied together, tying in that action from that IoT alert to automatically dispatch on field service and do things like that. But there's also a big missing part around kind of that customer information. So if you think about the customer's preferences, who they like to come on site, when they like to have service done, the last transaction, even that customer survey about their satisfaction level or how happy are they with us. So there's a lot of intelligence on that as well. So, if you think about all the people who touch a customer during a transaction, whether it's that last person who did a fix, and all the people who capture all that, again, that shared information across it, we're capturing all that in a centralized database. And just like IoT data from the machines is important, I think that customer information, that customer intelligence is important as well. Then you bring that together. So we've got machine data. What's going on with the equipment? Is it hot? Is it running long? Are the RPMs wrong? Then when does the customer like to be serviced? So now we're kind of bringing together this platform of kind of intelligent execution based on our customer preferences, our history, our performance with them, but also real-time machine data and real-time interactions on that as well.
So what do you see as the value and ROI that customers are seeing from these solutions? Yeah,
so unfortunately there's no big bang, right? You're not going to install this and all of a sudden revenues can quadruple. What we see is it's a lot of incremental value. So if you think about, again, some of those different processes that happen inside of it, you might be saving, a little bit on equipment from the monitoring perspective, a little bit of information on the call center, quicker dispatch. We were talking to a customer last week and we were talking about AI and bots. And you think about a simple concept of using AI to do a chat bot. But what does that really mean? So you might have less customer service agents. So there's value in there. You may also have less people just manning chat, which is their concern. Hey, we got a lot of people. How do we even handle this many chats if it really opens up from a social perspective? Then you also have things like consistent diagnostics, where we're using machine learning versus an individual to actually diagnose the problem more consistently, and then actually changing that into resolution. So the value, again, it's all those little steps, like how much was that piece of that transaction or this piece of this transaction. You look at the bigger picture, it really starts to add up. Now there's immediate value in all this stuff. You turn on one piece of it, you can start saving right there. But I think the bigger value is this longer term picture of it fully integrated, all the stuff tied together, and it's going to just be compounding on top of itself.
Right. So thank you for your time, Martin, today.
Oh, thank you.
So we're getting ready to welcome our final speaker, an IoT expert here at Microsoft. First, let's hear how one of the world's leading manufacturing providers is leveraging predictive analytics tools to meet customer demands for faster, more customized solutions. Take a look.
At Jabil, we're privileged to serve 250 of the best brands on the planet. We provide ideation services, design services, manufacturing services. We architect and orchestrate some of the most complex supply chains around the globe.
Some of the main challenges we're facing today is how the consumer mindset has drifted into all aspects of the company. People want things flexible, they want it customized, they want it quicker, and our systems have to be able to service everybody from automotive to healthcare.
We're dealing a lot with mass customization, decreasing product life cycles, and the need to provide more and more data to our customers.
From a Jabil perspective, we are transitioning from reactive to predictive tools to prevent risk and increase velocity.
We're really focused on how is it that we can do everything that we do more effectively, leveraging digital type technology.
As we start looking to what we think the challenges are going to be going forward, both what we want to do in the cloud and what we want to do on-prem, the Azure platform seemed to be the best fit for us on trying to mix those two worlds together.
Our engagement with Microsoft enabled us to do some exciting things in predictive analytics and trying to understand how we can become much more proactive in our management of our manufacturing processes.
Often we are data rich and information poor. So we can take the data from our manufacturing, we incorporated data from our supply chain and data from the field, and we can put that into our modeling. We can create some sophisticated models that allows us to predict defects and provide very good feedback to our customers on how to improve designs and improve the customer experience with the product.
We're working diligently to marry the data points from a reactive to a predictive mindset. So we're taking millions of data points and putting them into what's called the iFactory manufacturing suite. That's our new generation of shop floor control in the corporation. It integrates end-to-end production in all of our factories for the first time in the history of our group. The ability to exercise the tool both here in our facilities, in our DCs, and jump out to the cloud and back and forth is just unbeatable.
The predictive analytics, the use of iFactory, the integration of Microsoft Azure just helps us deliver that much faster, that much more efficient to ensure that when our customers, consumers receive that product, that it's a great experience.
Welcome back, everyone. It's time for our final session of the day. Here to share best practices and an expert's roadmap for the future is Microsoft IoT Commercial Lead, Raul Garg. Raul, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Wendy. My pleasure.
We'll start by asking our last poll of the event. Raul provided a poll question for this session. Let's take a look at it right now. If you had a $1 million check to invest in a technology that disrupts your industry, which one emerging technology would you invest in? Artificial intelligence, cloud, big data, blockchain, or IoT? Pick your answer and we'll share the results with you in a few minutes. So again, welcome, Raul.
Thank you.
So let's start out by, can you give us a sense of the current state of manufacturing today from your viewpoint? And what future trends are you seeing that are having the biggest impact on the industry?
Mm-hmm. Good question. So if you look at the macroeconomic factors which are kind of affecting manufacturing today, looking at the IMF reports, last year we grew around 3.1%. This year we are forecasted to grow around 3.5%. So there is definite momentum for manufacturers to look forward to. On the flip side, what we are also seeing is that we are seeing nationalism, protectionism, those kind of issues crop up in individual countries across the globe, which kind of dampens this momentum a little bit. We are trying to see what can be done to improve the free flow of goods, as manufacturers like to say. So with these kind of conflicting factors and also the fact that the oil price has marginally improved, not too much, not the way in which we would like, but it has improved. So looking at all of that, what manufacturers are doing now is they are trying to find innovative ways to actually reduce cost, increase revenue, try a new line of businesses, improve customer satisfaction. So they're trying all these kind of innovative ways. And some of the current trends we are seeing from a technology perspective is ways to help them do that. So for example, IoT, or advanced analytics, or machine learning, robotics, artificial intelligence. These are the current trends that we are seeing from a technology perspective, which are helping the manufacturers drive more innovative ways of expanding their footprints.
So what are some of the biggest challenges manufacturing organizations are facing today in implementing IoT projects? And can you identify a single biggest hurdle to a successful implementation?
Yeah. So, the top challenge that we are seeing the manufacturers face today when they implement an IoT project is identification of a very specific business problem that they're trying to solve. Often it sounds very misleading, saying, the businesses know what they're doing, so they should be able to solve. But it is a problem of choice. They generally have a lot of KPIs that they worry about, and choosing one specific business problem to attack and then get it under your control is not easy. So that is the biggest single problem I would say that they are facing. But there are other problems as well. Other challenges we are seeing in the manufacturing space is alignment of the key stakeholders. So for example, in any organizations, you have line of business owners, which are more focused on their line of businesses. You have operations team, you have IT, and then you have the sales and marketing wings. Generally, what we are seeing is to get them all together in a single room at the board level is very, very hard. So that is another challenge that they have to overcome. But if you look at how people who are successful, how companies that are successful have done that, they have focused on the business problem first and then gone backwards from there.
So how does a manufacturer get started with an IoT project, and how do you actually identify the best project to tackle first?
That's a great question. Like I said before, identification of business problem is one of the key challenge areas. I'll give you specific examples. That is the first place where you should start. ThyssenKrupp, which is the global manufacturer of elevators, when they started looking at their key business point of views, and one of the things that came out was they spent a lot of money on the field service. So, for example, sending field technicians on site who go and check if the elevators were working properly or not was a big cost item for them. And when they looked at, when you started looking at the machine learning algorithms and the data feeding into that, they realized that almost half of their machines did not need repair, so the field technicians were not required. Now, if they knew that in the hindsight, they would not send it, and it would take away a big cost item. So that kind of identification of a business problem is probably the first. Then followed by the alignment of the key stakeholders. Like I said, in a team, it is not just the IT, but it is the operations team, it is the line of business owners. Everyone has to sit in the same room. I can give you specific examples. We were working with Hershey Chocolates, the big brand name in US and globally. One of the things they did really well was when they were looking at how to implement their projects, they saw that if they had a way to automatically control the temperature of one of the large equipments which manufactures the Twizzlers, so they are doing Internet of Twizzlers, they would be able to save millions in terms of dollars. And so they got all the stakeholders aligned and brought them in the room, and then I was talking to George, who leads that project, and he was telling me that was one of the key things, and then it went backwards from there. Then the next step is once you have identified the business problem and you have the stakeholders aligned, the next step is to secure a budget. It is a big budget project, but you have to start small. As Martin was saying just a few minutes ago, you have to start small, so you have to identify some budgets, and then you have to see what is a subset of the big problem that you are trying to solve. That is what is called proof of concept or proof of value. So let's say, for example, field services is one, or predictive maintenance or remote monitoring, as Rockwell did. You have to identify which problem would make sense, and then identify which is the best partner to do it. So Hitachi, for example, is one of our top partners. They are not only deep in the business side, they're also very deep. They have the technical chops to get the job done. So you have to look at who are the partners who could do this, who understand the business as well as the IT side. Once you have identified the partners, the next thing is to look at what would be the most stable platform. And we often tell people that if you choose a cloud-based platform like ours, IoT Suite, it really helps you in every way. So, once you have identified the platform, the next step is, to look at the outcomes of the POC and then look at how to stage your deployments. So, for example, if you have deployment centers which are located in the southeast, in Florida or Atlanta, and then also in the east or west, you should not do the big bang approach of saying, I'll deploy this globally. You should do at one or two places, you should stabilize those deployments, and then look at adding the deployment to the next stage. That is how a successful IoT project really works.
So you've talked a lot about the business problems. Where should you focus, on the business problem or the technical challenge? And how do you think most people are approaching it today?
That's a very good question, because I have seen a bit of both, actually. A lot of the geeks in the company want to start connecting the equipments and the devices and looking at the data, which is a good way to get started. But really, when you are trying to solve or be successful with an IoT project, you have to start with the business problem. I mean, the question you need to ask is, and an easy way to do that is, what are the top 2-3 KPIs that you have today that keeps you awake at night? You start backwards from there. So if it means that you need to find out how your critical machines are performing, or you need to keep a tab on your customer satisfaction, or you want to reduce cost of the biggest cost of item, all of that, you have to just understand that, bring it to the team of stakeholders that I said before, and then pick one of the low-hanging fruits from that. You have to say that this is an achievable project within the time frame that I have, and I'm going to do this first. And then look at the ROI on that particular project. And then the technical things can come. So it's always the business problem first, in my view. We have seen about 10 to 15% projects succeed with just instrumenting the whole, let's say if it's a energy efficiency project. I've seen some of the projects which have succeeded with, starting technically first, but that is more an exception than the rule.
Yeah. So we often talk about the ROI of every project as a key success factor. How do you define success, and is it more than just that?
Yeah, so ROI is one of the best ways to measure whether the project succeeded or not, because at the end of the day, it is the benefit of the business to see and measure whether this makes sense for them. A lot of companies measure success in other ways. I have known companies which measure success in terms of customer satisfaction. Some people measure success in reducing the accidents in a particular setup, in a factory setup, for example. Some people measure success in allowing a transformation of a project. So, for example, a lot of companies who visit us tell us that they want to move from a product-based company to a services-based company, an SLA-based company. So that kind of movement from pay for products to pay for performance is also a measure of success. So it varies with the company, but what I would say is that at a fundamental level, the big way to measure is how does the business want to succeed on that space, whether that's ROI or customer satisfaction or reduction of accidents.
So many are calling this the fourth industrial revolution. Do you agree, and why?
So if you look at the first three industrial revolutions, the first one was powered by steam. The steam-powered hand looms and other things just changed the way we think about work. Instead of manual work, we had mechanized instruments which allowed people to do work. A lot of movements happened. People started kind of collating against a particular city, like Manchester was the big city at the time. But as things moved, the second big industrial revolution happened with the advent of electricity, which was the big mover. People started looking at assembly lines and so on. And then the third one came with the transistors in the 1960s. If you look at what that did, the whole computer industry that we see today, your own laptop here, is a result of the advent of that. So when we call something an industrial revolution, it's not just a revenue impact, it changes the way people think, it changes people's lives and so on. In that same line of thinking, I would definitely put IoT as the fourth industrial revolution enabler. And data is the new electricity, the new steam, whatever you want to call it. But that is driving fundamentally a shift in behavior on how companies are approaching products. They want connected product, they want predictive maintenance, they want remote monitoring. So all of these trends that we are seeing, makes me believe that yes, it is the fourth industrial revolution.
So what should be the end game in mind when you're designing an IoT project?
So when we see the end game in mind, I have always believed that at the end of the day, it has to be beneficial to the business. You have to start with a business problem, and the end game that you have to see is how does the business benefit out of this? If we get better view of our product through connected products, yes, that is the end game that you should have. If you feel that transformation of industry or a disruption of industry is your end game, then of course, IoT will help you do that. But you have to start with the fact that what does the business want you to drive? And once you have the stakeholder alignment in that, I think it goes easily backwards from there.
So why is cloud critical for success when implementing IoT projects?
So cloud is this big enabler. If you look at cloud, it allows you to deploy things globally. It has compute power, network power, storage power that we haven't seen in the industry before. It is also very secure. A lot of people in the manufacturing space actually speak about the security aspects. And I always tell them that it is another computer in a more secure data center than you have in your data center. So what I feel is it is a big enabler in the sense that it allows you to do your work for very cheap because you only pay for what you use. And it allows you a global scale of deployment in a very secure and robust way. So what we are seeing in the IoT space is cloud is becoming the enabler for people to start the projects, quickly measure whether that will scale or not. And then once they put a tick there, it scales pretty nicely from there.
Yep. So we're going to take a pause and move back over to our poll questions and see how our audience responded. If you had $1 million check to invest in a technology that disrupts your industry, which one emerging technology would you invest in? The top choice today was artificial intelligence. Is that surprising to you?
It is not surprising to me at all because, IoT and artificial intelligence, if you look at what we are doing with machine learning, which is part of AI or artificial intelligence, is how we are teaching the machines to become more predictive, and you can kind of take the cost away from most of the big ticket cost items that you have. I would have expected IoT to be at the same level, so it's a little less, which is fine. I think people are investing in those areas such as machine learning and IoT quite heavily today.
So we're up against time, but one last quick question. How do we know IoT isn't just another fad?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've been asked this question by many customers. The best way to measure whether something is a fad or not, in my view, is the fact that if it is here to stay or it is just a passing fashion. And what we are seeing with IoT is over the last 2 years that I've been in my role, I have seen over 200 projects take off, and now they have gotten roots. They are germinating and flowering and doing all kinds of things. People are benefiting, businesses are benefiting. And the second factor which allows me to say this is not a fad is the fact that customers coming to Redmond here, and when I do EBCs for them, they are asking us, can you help us implement these projects? So they see business benefits coming out of this. So this is definitely here to stay and not a fad.
Thank you. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Wendy.
So we've reached the end of our program. We hope you'd enjoyed this special live stream event and have gained some valuable insights to help your organization survive and thrive in the digital future. For more information on the topics we've been talking about here today, please click our resources button for bonus materials. If you have missed any part of this event or want to rewatch today's live session, check back here later when all of the content will be available to you on demand. Please keep up the conversation on Twitter using our hashtag MSFutureMFG. On behalf of Microsoft and the speakers you have heard here today, thank you for watching.